Our event for today is entitled Philippine Media Struggles for Freedom. And our speakers, you all know them by now, Howie Severino, Roby Alampay, and Patricia Evangelista. The three translators of literary and historical texts explore how it serves as a lifeline, bridging cultures and ideas. The first speaker is Howie Severino. He has been a journalist for nearly 40 years and has produced over 200 television documentaries. He is in his 23rd year as a documentarist for Eyewitness, one of the longest-running television shows in the Philippines. He's also a pioneering podcast host for GMA Integrated News. From 2009 to 2014, he was editor-in-chief of GMA News Online. His documentary on being an early COVID survivor, Ako si Patient 2828, won Best Documentary in the Philippines Gawad Tanglao Awards. In 2023, he was given the Balagtas Literary Award for his writings by the Union ng mga Manunulat sa Pilipinas. The next one would be Roby Alampay, a journalist, media executive, and advocate for press freedom, the founder and chairman of the Puma Public Productions, the pioneering force behind Puma Podcast, Southeast Asia's first non-music audio production company. Under his leadership, Puma Podcast has garnered international recognition, including inclusion in the U.S. Library of Congress Podcast Preservation Project. Alampay's journalism journey began in print media, where he played a pivotal role in establishing TV5's online news portal and served as editor-in-chief of Business World, the Philippines' oldest business daily. His tenure was marked by a successful digital transformation and financial turnaround of the publication. And our third would be Patricia Evangelista. Everybody knows she is a trauma journalist and former investigative reporter for the Philippine news company Rappler. Her debut book, Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country, an account of the Philippine drug war, was hailed as a journalistic masterpiece by The New Yorker. The book, released October 2023 by Random House, was the New York Times Top 10 Best Books of the Year, a New Yorker and Economist Best Books of the Year, and was Time Magazine's #1 nonfiction book of the year. It has since won the NYPL Helen Bernstein Book Award and was listed for the Moore Prize for Human Rights and the Penn Galbraith Awards. She lives in Manila. I would like you to welcome our speakers and how we will be the first one.
Thank you, Esther. They keep saying I've been working for 40 years. What they don't mention is that I started my career at 5 years old. No, actually, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm just joking. My son, I have a Gen Z son. He likes calling me a dinosaur, but I have to correct him. I say, dinosaurs are extinct. I'm still around. I'm still active, and I like to think I'm still in my prime. So, but what age does give me is a long perspective, and I think that's the reason why I was asked to speak first. I started my career before these two eminent journalists, and I'm going to start at the beginning and then fast forward several decades until our present era. So if we can go to the first slide. All right. So I often speak to a lot of digital natives, and then I flash a picture of an analog native. Oops. go back to the analog native. Okay, that's me as an analog native. So that's a film camera. This is around 1988. I used to cover the Cordillera insurgency and other issues in our mountain region in northern Luzon. And this is long before the internet and mobile phones. And when I had to file a story, I would have to hike back to the road and take a bus all the way back to Baguio, which is a mountain city in northern Philippines, to call in my story to the news desk of my newspaper, the Manila Chronicle, to a copy boy who would have a landline phone like this and would be typing. So my advantage is I have that kind of memory, but I'm using the kind of tools today that has empowered everyone. So if we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I started out as a photojournalist, and this is a sequence. This is part of a sequence of photos that I took on January 28, 1985. I covered the last years of the Marcos dictatorship. As you know, that lasted from 1972 to 1986. I graduated from university in 1983, so I was able to cover like this last 3 years of the martial law in the Philippines. So these were like a martial law enforcers. They're police. I want to show you this because. Moments after I shot this is part of about 22 shots that I took of a protest rally that ended up in a violent dispersal. And when I was taking pictures of a young college student who was being dragged away by the police, and at that time there were many students who were disappearing, so I was following them and taking pictures. And then next thing I knew, I felt a hand on my neck, and I too was being dragged away to join the students who got arrested. And I made it to a headline. Next, please. So I was arrested on the same day as this famous movie director Lino Broca. I was one of the 4 others. So I made it. I made it to the front page of the newspaper. Well, my name is somewhere there, but actually there are other headlines that had Broca, Lino Broca et al. Yeah, and I have an activist friend named Al Alegre, and he said, "Oh, I'm et al." Okay, so anyway, so I spent 8 days in jail for taking photos of this violent dispersal. I survived that, and eventually I was acquitted, and I like to think I've thrived as a journalist since then. But this is one of my first years as a journalist. I ended up arrested in jail, and I've lived to tell the tale today. But I want to fast forward real quick because I've been a journalist ever since 1985. But I want to jump to something that most of you are probably more familiar with. Can we have the next slide, please? So this is a shot that I took March 3, 2017. Pat Evangelista will probably have a lot more to say about this era and perhaps Robbie Alampay. But I just wanted to show a typical scene during the Duterte years. As you know, our former president is now facing charges of crimes against humanity in The Hague, at the International Criminal Court, for supposedly, allegedly ordering people to kill a lot of Filipinos. No? So this is actually a woman. I actually investigated this particular murder because most of the victims of the so-called drug war were men, and occasionally there were women who were murdered. And so I investigate. I followed this case as far as I could. It was never really seriously investigated. But I just want to show another picture. So that's it's actually a dramatic death pose. And it looked like she was begging for her life when she was killed. No, I don't want to keep this on for too long. I want to go to the next picture. So this is she was killed. This is that same chair that she was leaning on in that death pose. But she was killed while she was eating this meal. So I posted these photos online, and the photo of the dead body did not gain much traction, because during those days, during those years, there were lots and lots of pictures of dead bodies. What gained traction, what really became viral, was this photo, this series of photos of her her interrupted last meal. Next picture, please. So, and this is a close-up, and I got lots of reactions. There's no dead bodies here, but it spoke volumes about the fate of a lot of Filipinos back then. And a lot of journalists, brave journalists, a lot of my colleagues covered those years and had to endure a lot, just an overwhelming amount of trolling, death threats. Some people had to go overseas. Not just journalists, but activists, advocates, etc. It wasn't just the problem. Wasn't just our president. He was actually quite popular for doing this. And anyone who tried to push back, including journalists, activists, people belonging to the church, etc., got a lot of pushback in various ways. No? What was really trauma? I mean, see, Pat was described as a trauma journalist. So typically, I think you would think of journalists who cover trauma, like victims of disaster, conflict, crimes against humanity. But personally, what really traumatized me was not really seeing a lot of dead people, because as a journalist who has been doing this work for 40 years, I've covered a lot of deaths. I've covered casualties in war, disaster victims, fire victims, crime victims. What really traumatized me was people being killed in cold blood, and the supporters of our president applauding this. This was something new to me and to a lot of my colleagues. That, to me, was what traumatized me. And after covering, I did 5 documentaries. I do documentaries for a living. And after doing 5 documentaries about the Duterte killings, I couldn't do it anymore, because I felt if I continue doing this kind of work, I might go crazy. I might need some serious counseling, because what was really difficult for me as a journalist was taking this kind of risk, enduring this kind of trolling and demonization by our president's followers, and yet feeling like I was not making a difference. I was not making an impact. Journalists, we're oriented towards, we're trained. We gain a discipline to, face risks, to endure all kinds of consequences of our work, because we believe that that effort is going to lead to something good. And during those years, especially the early years, 2016, 2017, 2018, many of us were covering the war, the Duterte killings, and feeling like we weren't making any difference. We weren't helping stop the killings. In fact, what was happening was we started covering the Duterte killings from the very start. And rather than slowing down the killings or reducing the amount of killings or even stopping it, they actually increased. So we don't even know if what we did had any kind of positive impact. I just want to go to a last slide. Okay, so what I did was I investigated that particular crime. I said I don't, and various versions of that death pose appeared on front pages of our newspapers, but nobody really knew what the victim looked like. So I went back to the crime scene, I investigated, and so I needed to show that this dead person was alive at one point, and this is what she looked like. She was a 32-year-old employee of that restaurant who was killed. Up to now, we don't know the reason. Okay, and I want to show a last slide. So there were a lot. We also went to a lot of wakes of victims of the so-called drug war, and what added to the misery of a lot of families was that a lot of the victims' friends and loved ones couldn't even show up at the wakes because they were afraid. So, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, losing a loved one and you can't, and no one can even sympathize with you at the wake because people were afraid of being associated with someone who was branded a drug user. Okay. I wish I had a happy slide to end with, but the work of journalists in the Philippines is really like this. We also do happy stories, but maybe that's for another panel. But
Yeah.
thank you for listening.
Thank you. Roby?
It doesn't get any better from here. I'm Robbie Alampay. I've been a journalist less than 40 years. And Howie is one of the people I've always looked up to. And Patricia as well. And you'll hear, and you saw from Howie and you'll see from Patricia why I really feel, in a way, out of place here. I was, during the Duterte years, and I'll start with the Duterte years, but I'll zoom out to cover all other things as much as I can. But to be very clear, during the Duterte years, I was not out in the field. I was the head of 2 newsrooms. And so my job was to be in the newsroom and to deploy the young people like Patricia Evangelista. I mean, she was not part, yes, exactly. But she was not part of my newsroom, but I was among I was peers with her editors. And our job was to deploy the young people out into the field. So I want to be very, very clear about that. But during those times, my other job was to write editorials for our news organization, Interacción. And I keep telling people the first editorial I wrote about the coming dangers of the Duterte administration and the breakdown in rule of law, we wrote it 3 weeks before Duterte became president, before he officially took over as president. And we wrote it, we had to write it because as soon as Duterte was the president-elect, and there were still a number of weeks before he even assumed office, there were already mayors in small towns outside of Metro Manila who were already arresting people without warrant and parading them out in the streets with the signs that we will then grow to see little by little until it became a flood. No longer hanging on people being paraded, but placed atop the heads or the chests or the bodies of corpses, where it says, I am an addict, I'm a drug user, do not be like me. First slide, please. Now, it's easy, it's convenient to start with Duterte when we look at a number like this, because this is maybe something for those who follow the media in the Philippines and the state of media in the Philippines. This refers to the number of journalists killed in the Philippines since 1986. Why 1986? That was the supposed return of democracy. Howie was 5 years old, and I was still aspiring to be a journalist. I was in college, but that was the return of democracy in the Philippines. But I wanted to flash this because this is not all Duterte. Every president accounts for at least 12 to 24 deaths of this number. The plus there can stand for 2 things. It could stand for, oh my God, there's more. But really, the plus there also stands for, yeah, whatever, 200. That's a lot. We get it, right? Next slide, please. And therefore, we tend to lose our stories in the numbers. As somebody said in one of the panels yesterday, we cover people until they become numbers, and we cover the numbers until the numbers mean nothing. right? And we have to zoom back to people, and we have to zoom back to individual stories that are actually impossible to tell. But this is Frenchie May Cumpio. It's going on 5 years now that she is in prison, still at the pre-trial stage. I think they just recently got to the trial stage. But Frenchie May Cumpio is in pre-trials, has been in prison for more than 5 years. Most of you have never heard of Frenchie May. She's languishing in a prison. And RSF and the UN Rapporteur on Impunity has said these are all trumped-up charges. She's charged with aiding terrorists and trafficking illegal firearms. And that's the face that reminds you that there's a lot that we have to do in the Philippines, and it's not about the killings. It is not just about the killings. The kinds of violence that people were confronted with during the time of Duterte, just as an example, included things that you would never fathom. You can fathom killing, right? You can fathom killing. And us journalists, with our bravado, would tell each other, I've covered wars, I've covered revolutions, I've seen dead bodies, I've seen corpses that were burned, I've seen scars of torture. I'm ready for anything. I was there during martial law, and therefore I'm ready for anything. But actually, during the time of Duterte, you realize, no, you're not prepared. I have a colleague, for no reason at all related to Duterte, his daughter died in those years. Just because she had her own condition, and it was just a private affair. Nobody prepares a journalist to get trolled because your daughter died. Nobody prepares a journalist for hundreds of people to be trolling you online to say, well, you deserved it. That's my fellow anchor, one of the bravest, one of the most courageous journalists in the Philippines, Ed Lingao, lost his daughter, and he got trolled for it by the sympathizers of Duterte. Next slide, please. And like I said, you cover numbers until they mean nothing. These are the names of 273 journalists, not in the Philippines, but in Palestine, in Gaza. They include the names, by the way, of at least 3 Lebanese and 2 Israelis, right? And we know that these are people who exist, these are people who tried to cover, but we also know that people in power try to find some excuse, some nuance to say that, well, did they die because they were journalists? Were they victims? Were they collateral damage, as we use in the Philippines and also in Gaza? What does it matter? The reason it's 200 plus in the Philippines is because there are 2 methodologies for counting whether or not it's the death of a journalist. One group says, we presume that they did it in the time that they were killed in the line of duty until it is proven otherwise. There are other groups, including states, who say, no, let us wait for the evidence before we count them. But stories of individuals need not be a search for trends. At the end of the day, these are not even trends. At the end of the day, you can't even read the names. This is just one picture. And if you can deny that that one picture must suggest something, then you are denying the stories and the people whom we are trying to recapture and bring back alive, and to remind people again that these are real people. Next slide, please. You know, the whole argument to reject any questioning as to whether or not, well, were they journalists at the moment they were killed? It is an argument that scales. Most of the journalists that were killed in the Philippines were killed outside of Metro Manila. The further away you get from the urban centers, the more there are journalists. And there are people who are arguing, well, maybe they were unethical, maybe one guy had a marital affair, maybe one guy was killed because of gambling, and so on. These are also lawless lands. Maybe it was the local mayor. Maybe it was the local policeman. Maybe it was a soldier. Maybe it was the local powers that killed him. And then you are challenged to ask, how do we scale it and bring it back up to the ultimate powers of our society? The legislators, the policymakers, the presidents, the prime ministers, the states. How do you make that argument? And you make that argument by reminding that individual names and individual people will give you a context beyond even a war. Shireen Abu Akleh, Saleh Al-Jafarawi, these are two journalists, one thing common with them. They were both killed wearing blue flak jackets that read press in the course of doing their jobs. But the real context is that Shireen Abu Akleh was killed long before October 7. Saleh Al-Jafarawi was killed last week after the negotiated ceasefire. And now we are left, next slide please, with this number, 276 plus 77, 78, whatever. That is now the number. And it is continuing to grow in Gaza. And it continues to remind us that when we talk about the challenges and the threats confronting journalists in the Philippines or anywhere else in the world, it is not about the weapon. It is not about the mode of violence. It is about whether or not we can make that argument. That at the end of the day, it is not about local circumstance. It is not about the individual circumstances of a particular death. It is about the big picture that you see and whether or not people will deny. It is a thin line that divides ignorance with complicity, and as one of our Palestinian writers said earlier, Tariq, it is also a thin line that divides complicity with hypocrisy. There is a picture just by writing the names of all the people and all the journalists who are getting killed that makes you defy even the challenge to call for statistics, to identify trends, to bring out evidence. That picture alone should make all of us confront the questions of who is truly accountable, who is merely being ignorant, who is merely being in denial, or who is complicit and who is a hypocrite. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
I can't claim to have been in journalism for 40 years, but I have just turned 40. So I'm not going to show you slides either because I am terrible with slides. What I will do is tell you stories. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All of us know the theme of the Philippines Guest of Honor appearance in the Frankfurt Book Fair. It was taken from the Noli Me Tangere, written by Jose Rizal, who in 1896 was executed by our Spanish colonizers for sedition and rebellion. Imagination peoples the air, he wrote. Rizal wrote it about a woman named Sisa who sat on her front stoop, terrified that her children were not coming home. The true and full line is this: night favors belief, and imagination peoples the air with specters. It has been night for a long time in the Philippines, and the specters did not require imagination. When I was 23, news broke from south of the Philippines about the massacre. The facts were vague, but the headlines were clear. Dozens of journalists had been killed. So the next day, I flew out with a number of journalists, and we drove out to a small town called Ampatuan in a province called Maguindanao. I'll read so that I can tell you the story properly. I spent most of that day looking down, counting bodies, snapping pictures, measuring the distance between one corpse and another, noting the color and pattern of the muddied kerchiefs trampled on the ground. I saw a corpse fall from the teeth of a backhoe. The stench boiled low and thick. Newspapers laid over the broken bodies fluttered in the breeze. The military commander said recovering the bodies was like cutting through a birthday cake. A layer of soil, a body, a red car, more soil, then the bodies again, bloating bigger and bigger the deeper they dug. The circle of tape couldn't contain the crime scene as more and more bodies were found. So many that I could drop to my knees over a pile of banana leaves to photograph the body beneath. There, just under the bright green leaves, fat flies circling, a man's palm lay open to the sun with a scuffed silver watch still ticking away on his wrist. I looked up once and saw photographer after photographer standing on the ridge of the hill, their lenses flaring, silhouettes sharp against the noon sun. Some of them had missed joining the convoy by minutes, and still they stood watch, an honor guard for the dead. I still saw them. And the decade after, the image burned into my mind's eye as I found myself wandering across other killing fields and other places. That long line of journalists standing witness over the corpses of their comrades. I wanted to stand with them. When you're a journalist from the Philippines, those pictures stay in your mind. The possible and the improbable conflate, and your work is informed by the specters of the dead. You worry about libel cases. You worry about the safety of your sources. You worry, if you let yourself, that the turning of a doorknob might mean that you're standing in front the barrel of a gun. I'm always uncomfortable speaking about the safety of journalists because it feels self-important. What is any sort of fear on my part compared to the people who have risked their lives to tell us their stories? But we're talking about media struggles now, and there's no greater threat to journalists than the threat of death. The dead do not publish. The dead do not investigate. After Maguindanao, we said never again. And still, 20 journalists are dead under the presidency of Rodrigo Duterte. 5 journalists at least have been killed halfway through the president of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And when it happened, the world stood with us in Maguindanao, stood with us in shock and horror and condemnation, and still, it happens again and again. There is no national border to the tribe of journalists. A journalist killed in Manila and a journalist killed in Gaza. They are both journalists, and with each death, we lose both a person and a witness. I'm going to read to you from the stories of the journalists who were on the field. Here from journalist Ahmed Halal, as reported by the BBC. A cup of coffee mixed with ground chickpeas or a glass of unsweetened tea might be all you can consume during an entire workday. We suffer from severe headaches and fatigue, unable to walk from the sheer hunger, but we still carry on with our work. Here, from journalist Shrouk Al-Alia, as reported by the Columbia Journalism Review. I was filming in the camps, and I remember an old woman telling me, "Consider me as your mom. I advise you to leave this camera. This camera is going to kill you." And I told her that it killed my husband. She told me, "Just go home, stop working, Stay with your babies if you have babies. I said, yeah, I have one baby. She said, don't put yourself at risk. They are targeting doctors and journalists. Here, finally, is 28-year-old Al Jazeera journalist Anas Al-Sharif. This is my will and final message. If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice. Anas Al-Sharif filed his last story in August. His obituary, as was the case for many Palestinian journalists, was prepared in the event of his death. I have lived through pain in all its details, he said. I tasted suffering and loss many times. Yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification, so that Allah may bear witness against those who stayed silent, those who accepted our killing, those who choked our breath and whose hearts were unmoved by the scattered remains of our children and women, doing nothing to stop the massacre that our people have faced for more than a year and a half. There is still an abiding belief that journalists are meant to be objective. We never are. We strive to be honest. We try to be fair. We hope to be truthful and balanced and accurate. But we are never neutral. We know the difference between a killing and a murder, an encounter and an execution, a target and a civilian, self-defense and genocide. The killing of a journalist is a war crime. Every person, every institution, every book fair should stand in condemnation if they want the freedom to speak and the freedom to publish. There is no free press. There is no polite free speech, because that free speech was fought in blood in Palestine by journalists who woke to drones and slept to bombs. We cannot have any sort of free speech when the storyteller is dead. Jose Rizal, who we honor in this pavilion, offered a plea in the Noli Me Tangere. He said, "Do not forget those who fell during the nighttime." Thank you.
This was a very reflective session, and we would like to invite interaction from the audience or from the guest speakers themselves. Please raise your hand. If anybody wants to, say something after these talks or ask some questions to any of our speakers. Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think nobody really can say something because we are also impressed by your work, by what you said. It's thank you very much for sharing that with us. We here in Germany, we have totally different situation. I'm a journalist too, so I know that life for us is in many ways much easier, even though we also have to do tough stuff sometimes, but it's another dimension, sure, and also more difficult conditions. Yes, but what I wanted to ask you, the three of you, and maybe there are a lot of other journalists in the Philippines who do this kind of work. How is the interaction and the support amongst each other? I mean, are you kind of organized also, and is there kind of a union of the journalists or something like that? That would be interesting for me to know.
Yes, Howie first.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie, for your solidarity and the question. Yes, there are various associations of journalists in the Philippines, and we also offer each other solidarity and support. But on the other hand, we're also, like many journalists, we're very competitive. So it's often difficult to get us all to agree on anything. But I just want to share a personal experience. When we realized what was going on during the Duterte years, covering the killings, and then we ourselves, the journalists, being condemned by many people in our audience, in the public, we felt very isolated, and we felt scared. Actually, many of us felt scared, and I started hosting small gatherings in my home for journalists, so we can just feel that we're not that alone, and what we're doing is right, despite many people saying all we were broadcasting, all we were reporting were lies. So we had to kind of convince each other that what we were doing is the right thing, despite the risks and the dangers and other consequences. So I was doing this actually for 2 years. Until there was something called the Matrix, released by the government, from the office of the president, actually. He released kind of it was actually all false, but it was like a diagram of conspirators against him, against the government, and against the president himself. I was included in the Matrix, and many of my colleagues were included in this matrix, as if we were all conspiring to bring down the government. And that kind of ended my hosting of these meetings of journalists, just so we could offer each other solidarity. I don't know if they found out that I was hosting the meetings and then put my name on this kind of this watch list. And during those years, if you appeared on a watch list, your life was genuinely in danger. That's how a lot of people were targeted. They were put on a watch list. And so myself and several other colleagues, our names were put on this watch list, and I had to protect my own family. So I stopped hosting those meetings. But that was one effort. There were other efforts that maybe my colleagues here can talk about. But every little effort like that to offer each other support in what we were doing, which was exposing this extreme wrongdoing in our society, there was like this immediate pushback from the government and its supporters, and to a certain extent it was effective. It was effective. It created this really widespread chilling effect that was quite difficult to overcome.
Pat?
I was part of the night shift. It was an informal group of reporters, photographers, filmmakers. Alex is over there. You should watch her film. It's called Aswang. But there wasn't any official gathering or anything, but I think the reason we survived was because of that community of journalists. None of us were really covering alone. Even when it is a story with just your byline, someone else gave you the source. Someone else lent their car. Someone else said, I'll go with you so you don't go alone. And it mattered. It mattered to be standing over a body tonight, lighting a cigarette, and knowing the next night, the same photographer who lit your cigarette for you will be beside you again. So it's a community of people who drank a lot and smoked a lot and mostly survived because they had each other.
And because we had other people as well. I'll be more direct than Howie. We're not only competitive, some of us really don't like each other. But we know, we have a very strong sense of what's right, what's wrong, and certainly what's way too much. And I'd like to acknowledge that we have people here from the church who gave us sanctuary. There are your diplomatic missions, ambassadors who opened their doors for a dinner a month. I was talking to one of the ambassadors, and there's this, what they call the Media Freedom Coalition, which is a coalition of governments who supposedly endorse free expression. Most of the EU embassies are members of that. And there was recently an audit to review the impact of the MFC. And a Swedish woman was asking me, what do you think? Because all they do are statements. And not only that, because the MFC is couched with embassies, it is in diplomaties. And they're really not much of statements. But I said, well, statements are not just words. Statements it's a dinner. It is opening your doors, your homes. And certainly the agents of the state are watching who gets invited, who is going into that space. And I think that was enough of a statement to say that the world is watching. And we are watching not just government, we are watching out for these journalists. And that mattered. We had friends in the legal community, we had friends in the activist community. And the important thing to remember is that we've always had these friends whom from time to time we don't like, and very often they don't like us either. But we've had these episodes from martial law, from the time Howie was 5 years old, through every revolution and every upheaval. And we come together because we know when too much is too much, when we have a common sense of what is right and wrong, and we circle our wagons, even for those whom we don't like. The other thing that kept us going, I just want to share something that Sheila Coronel, one of our most esteemed journalists, she said in the 1970s, when she was a student journalist and presses were banned and every printer needed to be registered with government, they had no choice but not even to mimeograph, but to stencil their reports, right? To stencil and to silk screen their reports. And they asked each other, why are we doing this? We can only silk screen 100, 200 copies of these reports, of these statements every single time, and they're going nowhere. But they made sure to send at least 2 copies to the library of the University of the Philippines religiously, just on the faith that at some point that will be of use to someone. When 1986 came and the revolution happened and democracy returned, a librarian at the University of the Philippines did in fact keep them. And they became evidence for reparations for human rights victims. And that's what happened generations later with the generation of Patricia, with, as Howie said, the biggest fear we had was not getting killed. The biggest fear we had was the irrelevance that we were feeling because nobody was paying attention. Because the people that we thought might be better leaders did not get elected. The ones that we thought were terrible kept winning. And we asked ourselves, why are we still doing this? But the reports that they had, and maybe some of the reports that nobody read, are now evidence at the ICC to try a former president for crimes against humanity. That kept us going.
Thank you, Roby. Is there anyone else from the public? Yes?
I'm not a journalist, I was a teacher. But I don't have a question. I just want to express my honor to all of you, to you three, to all of you, because I think you are very brave and you are fighting for the right things and brave to be there and tough to do all these things and keep on fighting. And I must say, I wondered, or my English, sorry. I was so, it was wondering, I was wondering that, and I appreciate it absolutely, that you bring it together with Gaza, because I didn't expect that. From the Philippines to Gaza, to see what happens there and to connect, and this international solidarity between journalists, between people, I appreciate very much, and I say thank you to you that you see this and that you what you do, and especially Patricia, you say the words are so clear and so pregnant, so absolutely. I thank you very much for your clear words to express what journalism is and what happens there in the Philippines and what happens in Gaza, and that journalism never is neutral. I like that because it's kind of an idea which was never true and is never true. I was so impressed of your speech, I nearly had to cry. Thank you very much, you three.
Thank you, ma'am.
We would like to any reactions from our speakers, because this is really something, no? Everybody's impressed, and you're a different species.
Well, thank you so much for the support and those words. I mean, by themselves, they actually make what we do worthwhile. In our own country, we often don't get the same appreciation. We have to leave the country to. But I just want to reiterate something that my colleague here, Robbie, mentioned, that during those really dangerous years, those dark years of the early Duterte regime, a number of European embassies and ambassadors offered us safe spaces to discuss. It was very dangerous to express what we were really feeling, what we were really observing in a lot of public forums like this. But I attended events at the homes of several European ambassadors where we were with other colleagues and made to feel that it was a safe space. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Europeans in general for having those kinds of ambassadors and representatives in our country who offered us a safe space where we could actually feel free to share our anxieties, our concerns with each other and with our hosts. Thank you.
Roby?
No, I really have nothing else to add except to say thank you for allowing us to have this platform and allowing us also to offer ourselves in all humility. It's been said so many times, use your freedom to speak for those who do not have it. And you know, it sounds romantic and it sounds trite, to be perfectly honest. But in situations such as this, you do feel that the privilege is a gift that you have to keep paying forward. There were people before us, behind us, around us, beside us, who allowed us to struggle and who allowed us to survive and who allowed us to have these platforms. And it is the least that we can do to say that we know the struggle of other people. I was just with a young Palestinian woman earlier in the earlier panel, and she actually spoke quite eloquently for everybody else who was there. She was just part of the audience. And she said, well, I guess people who struggle understand the struggles of other people.
Pat? There's a room for question, yes?
Hello, my name is Marina. I'm a journalist from Austria, but feeling very close to the Philippines because, yeah, I'm half Philippine. Halo, halo. Yes, and as a journalist here in Europe, I feel very much admiration and solidarity for what you are doing. And I'm sometimes upset when I look at the media coverage about the Philippines here in Germany and in Austria, that's really something that I also experience in some newsrooms, that when you suggest something about the Philippines that nothing to do with typhoons or the drug of war, it doesn't seem to be interesting for media here. I don't know whether the book fair will change something about that. I hope so. But my question is, what you talked about the situation under Duterte. What about now? Because you also mentioned there were journalists. Journalists were killed under Marcos Jr. and there were also the drug-related killings continuing. And also, when looking at the media coverage here a few years ago during the election, everyone was watching and excited. What will happen? Marcos Jr., the son of the dictator, will become president. What will happen? And then it seemed nothing happened. It does not exist anymore in the German and Austrian media because, yeah, you're aware of the fact that Marcos Jr. is internationally well known. He seems to be okay. But what is the situation in the Philippines?
Yes, Roby?
Okay, I'll say it. To be perfectly honest, I mean, this is much, much better under President Marcos. I mean, if you talk about the situation of Philippine media right now. But the way he rules and the way he deals with media and information brings with it a lot of other dangers and a lot of other problems. There are the systemic things that come with the deaths and the attacks of journalists that could have happened before his term, after his term. But I think it's fair to say that one of the biggest fears of Filipinos when it came to the possibility of a Marcos returning to power was not necessarily the specter of, oh, he's going to declare martial law all over again, right? Or there's going to be a lot of human rights violations. No. I think the biggest thing we feared was the impunity that the Marcos name stands for. This is a president whose family has been proven to have stolen billions of dollars from their people. The president himself represents an account for himself that is being sued by government to pay hundreds of billions of pesos in taxes that the government has already decided should be claimed from him. So the fact that he is president is really signaling to our country that we have a lot to do, because the impunity is institutionalized and now it has been elected, and they are treating it as if it were a referendum on whether or not they are still to be billed, on whether or not they are still to pay for something. That impunity and that sense of impunity is the same thing that really threatens journalists at the end of the day. They will say that people are getting killed in the provinces, not in the cities. And that's an important point for them to make, because they will acknowledge that in certain provinces, in certain villages, the powers are local political dynasties, are local warlords, parlance that even government is comfortable with acknowledging and saying out loud. In other words, they are saying there are things that happen at the micro level of our government that is beyond the control even of government. But one thing that we know for sure is that when leaders, when officials, when our leaders say, wait, this is too much, we cannot have this, for moments, and it has never been a pattern, but for moments, we can prove and we can show that it actually quiets down, that the killings actually stop. In other words, you want a leader who will demonstrate that, embody that with all credibility, that when he says or when she says that we need to return to a society ruled by law, that when we need to return to a society without impunity, that when we need to return to a society where everybody is accountable regardless of your power, things will actually happen. At best, people will say he's benign. At best, people will say, at least he's not Duterte. That's not a very optimistic thing to stand for. And all the forces that they refuse to acknowledge, whether it's at local politics or the institutionalized impunity that pervades our financial systems all the way to our criminal and justice systems, the real question is what danger and what risks and what threats and what violence does passivity bring to this?
I think it is necessary to emphasize that 5 journalists died under Ferdinand Marcos Jr. We don't say only 5 journalists died. We say 5 died under Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Robbie is right. Compared to Duterte, he seems benign. But the bar that Duterte sets is a sort of bar where a man will say the fact you're a journalist does not mean you're not a legitimate target of assassination if you're a son of a bitch. Duterte is also the man who stands behind the podium, says 32 people died this morning, what a beautiful thing. The bar is very low. We don't set it there. We cannot leave the bar that low. So under Ferdinand Marcos, at least 900 people, according to Project Dahas, were killed in drug-related deaths. He doesn't stand behind the podium and says, kill them all. But they die anyway. And a president needs to stop that impunity and say, not under my watch.
Wow. Any more reactions from the audience? Yes, please.
I was discerning whether to stand up, but I managed to get the courage to stand up because I just want to say thank you. And I know you represent the night crawlers, the journalists, the reporters, and I salute you for your competence, your integrity, your quickness of movement, your availability, and these things belong to prophets, and you are prophets. And who is speaking? I'm Father Albert Alejo, a Jesuit priest, a Catholic in a Catholic-dominated country where all these things are happening to our embarrassment. And I think your function is not just to report, to document for future compensation, but also to empower us, including the church, by embarrassing us. And thank you for this spiritual embarrassment. But please, do something more. Challenge us. Interview the bishops, not just your darling bishops. Let them commit blunders when they answer. Let them squirm when you ask them, when you interrogate us. Challenge our institutions, including the church. Make us feel uncomfortable that all this blood is dripping on the land that was supposed to have been evangelized for 500 years. And in Asia, we feel embarrassed. We cannot be good missionaries because we don't have yet a country that we can be proud of. And so, God bless your work. This is your mission. Challenge us.
Thank you so much. Our timekeeper is saying time's up. Thank you, Pat. Roby, Ahoy, you want to say the last word?
Yeah, well, many people here probably are not familiar with Father Albert Alejo, otherwise known as Paring Bert. he just heaped praise on us, but this man, we owe this man a lot as well. He's inspired us because of his own humanitarian mission in the Philippines. He's been active on these human rights issues maybe much longer than most people. So we salute you too, Paring Bert. Thank you for
a
being
real
here.
poet. Thank you very much.